The sun beat down on the White House press briefing room as the media vultures circled, sensing political blood in the water. For weeks, Attorney General Letitia James had dominated the headlines. Her fiery accusations against President Donald Trump and his administration were plastered across every screen in America. She had accused the Trump administration of interfering with ongoing state investigations, manipulating legal processes, and even suggested financial misconduct involving federal funds funneled into Trump's Rural Economic Revival program. The liberal networks were eating it up. MSNBC ran 24/7 coverage, calling it the final nail in the Trump presidency. CNN used words like corruption, criminal, and constitutional crisis. But behind the scenes, something was stirring. Karoline Leavitt, President Trump's youngest-ever White House press secretary, wasn't rattled. She wasn't flinching. She was watching, waiting, calculating. At just 30, Karoline had become one of the most formidable figures in Washington, a woman underestimated by her opponents, beloved by Trump's base, and feared by liberal pundits. Her calm, sharp-eyed demeanor concealed a spine of steel. While James was playing the media game, Karoline was hunting something far more dangerous, the truth. Inside the West Wing, Karoline huddled with Chief of Staff Stephen Miller and the president himself. "Letitia has no idea we're about to flip this whole narrative," Karoline said, her voice unwavering. President Trump leaned back, arms folded. "You sure this is solid?" Karoline placed a leather-bound file on the table. "Solid as the wall you built in Texas." The file contained internal documents, whistleblower reports, and even a hidden audio recording from within the New York Attorney General's office, leaked by a disillusioned staffer. What it showed was shocking. Not only had Letitia James fabricated elements of her accusations, but she had also allegedly colluded with political PACs and media executives to time her attacks with campaign cycles, all while hiding massive ethical violations within her own office. The press room was electric. Karoline Leavitt walked onto the stage like a gladiator entering the arena. Her powder blue suit stood out in the sea of dark ties and black dresses. As cameras flashed and journalists shouted, she simply raised her hand. Silence. Today, she began, the American people deserve the truth, not the filtered narrative, not the partisan spin, not political theater. The truth. A ripple of anticipation moved through the room. For weeks, Letitia James has used her position not as a public servant, but as a political assassin. She has made allegations without evidence, claimed crimes without charges, and attempted to disgrace this administration with lies. Gasps. Karoline turned to the massive screen behind her. Click. A slide appeared, an email exchange between Letitia James and top donors from a left-wing PAC. "We need to time the next reveal just as Trump hits Ohio." Click. A voice recording played. It was unmistakably Letitia's voice. "We'll leak the finance story this week. Doesn't matter if it's airtight, just needs to look messy." Click. Another email. "If we can drag Trump's numbers down 5 points by May, we win the Senate map." The reporters were frozen. CNN's Jim Acosta looked like he'd seen a ghost. Karoline leaned forward. "These aren't theories. These are facts. Sourced from inside the Attorney General's own office. Validated by forensic experts. Cross-referenced with public timelines." She paused. The question is no longer, did President Trump interfere in state investigations? It's now, did Letitia James weaponize her office to sabotage a sitting president? Backstage, President Trump watched the live feed from the Oval Office, nodding slowly. "She's better than Kayleigh ever was," he muttered. In New York, Letitia James was mid-interview on MSNBC when the network cut her off mid-sentence. "We're sorry to interrupt, but we're going live to Washington where new evidence has just surfaced, potentially implicating Attorney General Letitia James in a wide-scale political conspiracy." Her face fell. Letitia James was no stranger to political storms. She had weathered protests, lawsuits, and pressure campaigns. But this was different. As she sat stunned in the MSNBC studio, watching Karoline Leavitt's press conference unfold in real time, she could feel her carefully crafted narrative collapsing like a house of cards. Her phone buzzed once, twice, and then incessantly. "Turn it off," she snapped at her aide. But the damage was already done. Clips from Karoline's live broadcast were already trending across social media. On X, formerly Twitter, #CarolineExposesLetitia was the #1 trend within 20 minutes. Conservative influencers, mainstream outlets, even a few moderate Democrats were now demanding answers. In the White House, Karoline wasn't done yet. She flipped another page in her dossier and turned to the reporters. "What you've just seen is only part of the story," she said. "Our office has compiled a 58-page report that outlines not only the corruption within the New York Attorney General's office but also, brace yourselves, an attempt to solicit foreign data to damage the president." A roar broke out in the room. "You're saying Letitia James tried to collude with a foreign source to smear Trump?" barked a Reuters reporter. Karoline nodded. "Yes, we have digital communications between one of her aides and a British data analysis firm connected to, ironically, the same circle that created the Steele dossier during the Russia hoax." A stunned silence fell over the room. She clicked to the next slide. A chain of emails with highlighted text. "Can your team simulate financial irregularities on federal grants? We don't need real proof, just credible modeling to raise flags." The source? One of Letitia's senior legal analysts. Karoline raised her eyes and met the gaze of every journalist in the room. "Let me be clear. This is not political revenge. This is self-defense. A good woman, this administration, this president, has been under coordinated attack by political actors masquerading as public servants. That ends today." The doors at the back of the room opened. Walking in were 3 men in dark suits. 2 federal inspectors and a legal counsel from the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility. "Effective immediately," Karoline said calmly. "A formal ethics inquiry is being opened into Attorney General Letitia James. And if needed, criminal referrals will follow." Meanwhile, across the country, cable news exploded. Even liberal hosts couldn't hide their shock. Some tried to deflect. This could be Russian disinformation, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow suggested, but her viewers weren't convinced. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson, back in action via his digital show, declared, "Karoline Leavitt just did what no Republican has done in the last 5 years. She flipped the narrative in a single press conference." Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a Republican critic of Trump, admitted on CNN, "This is a body blow to Letitia James. If those emails and recordings are verified, her career is over." But in red states like Texas, Florida, and Ohio, Trump supporters took to social media with renewed energy. Karoline just bodied Letitia James on national TV. One TikTok video blared, synced with a remix of patriotic music and Trump 2024 banners. It went viral in less than 2 hours. Back at the White House, Karoline finally stepped off the podium, greeted with applause by staffers in the hallway. Stephen Miller handed her a bottle of water. "You just lit a political wildfire." She took a sip and smirked. "Good. Let it burn through the lies." New York, that evening. Letitia James called an emergency press conference from her office. "I categorically deny all allegations," she said, eyes bloodshot but voice firm. "This is a political hit job." But her attempt at counterattack fell flat. One by one, journalists began to press her, not with softball questions but hard-hitting demands for clarity. "Is this your voice on the leaked tape? Why did your team reach out to a UK-based firm with ties to Steele? What do you mean by, we just need it to look messy?" She faltered. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The strength in her voice cracked. I won't respond to manipulated context," she stammered. In the background, the storm was brewing. Congressional Republicans were calling for her resignation. A handful of Democrats quietly distanced themselves. And Karoline? She was already preparing for round 2. Because the next bombshell wasn't just going to rock Letitia James. It was going to blow the lid off the entire political media machine. The next morning, America woke up to a country in shock. Overnight, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even Politico had grudgingly published segments of Karoline Leavitt's report. Independent analysts had verified the metadata on the emails. The audio was deemed authentic and untampered. The political landscape wasn't just shifting, it was quaking. In liberal circles, panic quietly brewed. MSNBC canceled its morning lineup to run damage control. At CNN, internal memos were leaked showing producers in emergency mode trying to figure out how to spin the story without admitting they'd played into Letitia James' narrative without vetting it. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's name was on every American's lips. At conservative diners in Oklahoma, in suburban family chats in Pennsylvania, and even in inner-city barber shops in Detroit, people were talking about that girl from the White House who dropped the hammer on Letitia. Inside the White House Situation Room, things were heating up in a very different way. Karoline met with President Trump, his son Eric, and a few top legal advisors. Trump looked like he had just won a primary debate. "You broke the media machine in half," Trump said, pacing. "This isn't just about clearing our name anymore. It's time to expose the whole damn swamp." Karoline nodded. "That's why I'm asking to go public with Phase 2. Stephen Miller leaned forward. "Are you sure?" "It's a nuclear option." Karoline didn't blink. "We have to. This goes beyond Letitia." She handed the president a second binder marked with a bold red stamp. "Confidential Operation Puppet Strings." Inside, a web of communications linking Letitia James, senior staff at 2 media conglomerates, an opposition research firm out of San Francisco, and 3 U.S. senators. But that wasn't all. What Karoline had found, what her quiet team of cybersecurity whistleblowers had uncovered, was a sophisticated disinformation campaign designed to erode public trust in Trump's policies using coordinated media narratives, fake social media accounts, and psychological manipulation techniques. "This is why the media moved in lockstep," she said. "It wasn't just bias. It was engineered." Trump sat back in his chair, stunned for the first time in the meeting. Holy hell! By late afternoon, Karoline was back in front of the cameras. But this time she wasn't alone. Standing behind her were several Trump officials, including cybersecurity advisor Tom Bossert and even a whistleblower from within the FCC, his identity protected under a federal whistleblower statute, but his words deadly clear. The attacks against President Trump, particularly in economic and foreign policy areas, were seeded through synthetic narratives, some created by algorithmic disinformation bots tied to domestic and foreign consulting firms. Karoline picked up from there. "We believe Letitia James was one of the central political figures used to authenticate this synthetic campaign by lending legal weight to false claims. Her office's involvement in coordinating releases with media figures is under DOJ review." Then she dropped the final payload. "We also have evidence that a sitting senator received direct campaign donations from a media executive involved in shaping these false stories. That information has been turned over to the Federal Election Commission." You could have heard a pin drop. The reaction across the country was immediate. Conservative news hailed it as a digital Watergate. Progressives scrambled, with some calling it a distraction tactic. But the real shift was with independent voters. Suddenly, voters who had been lukewarm about Trump's return saw a White House that wasn't just defending itself, it was exposing deep political rot. Polling from Rasmussen and Gallup showed a 12-point swing in trust for the Trump administration over 48 hours. Karoline's approval rating among Republican voters shot to 89%, while trending at 58% among independents. Even former Never-Trumpers like Ben Shapiro and Glenn Beck called her a generational communicator. Letitia James? She was now under siege. The New York Bar Association announced it was launching an independent ethics inquiry. The Manhattan DA opened an internal investigation. And Governor Kathy Hochul, once a staunch ally, began quietly creating distance. In an uncharacteristic move, Letitia canceled all public appearances for the week. Her press secretary offered a cold statement. "The Attorney General will not dignify conspiracy theories. When the dust settles, truth will prevail." But inside her office, morale was collapsing. Staffers whispered about resignations. Subpoenas were flying. And the sound of shredders echoed late into the night. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt was preparing for the next step. This wasn't just about media exposure now. It was about accountability. Her plan? A congressional hearing with live testimony, subpoenaed tech executives, and former AG staff. "This is bigger than Trump. This is about restoring integrity to every institution," she said. Trump smirked. "You know, if I ever step down, you should run for something." Karoline replied without missing a beat. "Let's fix this country first." 1 week later, the world was watching. Every major news outlet had cleared their schedule. Congress had convened a special oversight hearing to investigate the allegations brought forth by White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. The chamber was packed. Cameras lined the walls. Influencers live-streamed from the balconies. Protesters gathered outside, waving signs that read "Truth Matters" and "Investigate the Investigators." And at the center of it all sat Karoline Leavitt, cool and composed in a crisp white blazer. To her left was the FCC whistleblower now identified as Marcus Grant, a former cybersecurity specialist with top-secret clearance. On her right sat constitutional law professor Ellis Berman, called to testify about the legality of Letitia James' alleged misuse of state office. The chairman of the committee, Representative Jim Jordan, opened the hearing. "Today, we begin an investigation into what may be the most coordinated attack on a sitting president in modern American history. We have reason to believe that political figures, media moguls, and government institutions conspired to mislead the public, manipulate elections, and silence truth. Karoline adjusted the mic and began. My name is Karoline Leavitt. I serve as the White House press secretary under President Donald J. Trump. I'm not here today to settle political scores. I'm here because the American people deserve to know how far some were willing to go to destroy a president who refused to play by their rules. She laid out the timeline. Pushpin February 2024, Letitia James' office begins quiet consultations with a data firm known for opposition research listed under a vague shell company registered in Delaware. Pushpin April 2024, drafts of smear campaigns targeting Trump's economic policies begin circulating among progressive digital outlets. Pushpin June 2024, secret coordination between James' staff and 3 news producers results in the publication of exclusive financial misconduct stories now debunked. Pushpin August 2024, anonymous bot networks amplify those stories. Karoline's team traced the servers to a U.S. territory later linked to a consulting firm based in San Francisco with funding from foreign sources. Karoline tapped her folder, then looked up. Every single one of these claims is backed by email chains, financial records, and whistleblower testimony. And yet, for months, the public was told these stories were based on independent journalism and legal fact. It was a lie. Letitia James did not appear at the hearing. Her attorney submitted a written statement calling the investigation political theater. But her absence only made things worse. As Marcus Grant took the stand, he revealed details that sent shockwaves across the chamber. We discovered that media storylines were being written weeks before actual investigations were opened. The coordination was unprecedented. I've worked under both Republican and Democratic administrations, and I've never seen this level of manipulation. Senator Josh Hawley, one of the members of the Oversight Committee, leaned in. You're saying the American people were being gaslighted systematically? Grant didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying. Professor Berman added a chilling note. If true, these actions not only violate multiple ethics laws, they also may amount to election interference under federal statutes. This isn't just political misconduct, it's criminal. Social media exploded. TikTokers live-streamed clips of Karoline's statements with captions like, "She didn't come to play." Meme accounts posted side-by-side photos of Letitia James next to Nixon with the caption, "Same tactics, different decade." Even on historically liberal Twitter accounts, a few cracks began to show. One viral post read, "You don't have to love Trump to admit this is deeply corrupt. What else have they been hiding?" Meanwhile, Democrats on the committee tried to deflect. Representative Adam Schiff dismissed the hearing as a PR stunt for an administration obsessed with revenge. But when Karoline was asked directly whether this was about vengeance, she replied with the calm precision of a prosecutor. No, Congressman. This is about restoration. This is about making sure that no American, Republican, Democrat, or Independent has to wonder if their government is being weaponized against them. Back in New York, Letitia James was unraveling. More leaks hit the press. An anonymous aide revealed that internal panic was at DEFCON 1. Subpoenas were flying fast. Her email server was seized. 2 staffers resigned. A grand jury was reportedly being assembled to review the material. And worst of all for her was the court of public opinion. Polling showed her approval rating dropping from 51% to 22% in 4 days. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt had become a national sensation. College students were painting murals of her. A country song titled, "She Spoke the Truth," debuted at number 8 on the iTunes chart. Even Hollywood stars were quietly reaching out for interviews. That evening, on a special edition of Hannity, Trump made a surprise appearance. The media lied. The government was weaponized. But one woman stood up and said, "Not on my watch." He turned to the camera. Karoline Leavitt is not just the press secretary. She's a patriot. And thanks to her, America just took the first step back toward truth. 3 weeks had passed since Karoline Leavitt's jaw-dropping testimony before Congress. The ripple effects weren't just national, they were global. Across Europe, political commentators were analyzing the situation as a textbook example of weaponized governance. In Africa, leaders who had once criticized the U.S. for moral grandstanding now used the scandal as evidence that no nation was immune from corruption. But back in the U.S., one woman's star continued to rise. Karoline Leavitt had gone from press secretary to a symbol of truth, courage, and American resolve. And Letitia James? Her once proud reputation was now buried beneath an avalanche of evidence, public outrage, and a federal investigation. On a quiet Monday morning, Letitia James stepped out of her black SUV and walked into the New York Supreme Court building, not as a prosecutor, but as a defendant. Camera flashes lit up like lightning bolts. Protesters cheered. Reporters jostled for sound bites. "Ms. James, are you resigning? Is it true you falsified court filings? What do you say to the people of New York?" But Letitia didn't say a word. Her eyes were sunken, her expression defiant, but it was the silence of someone who knew the game was over. Inside, the charges were read. Count 1, abuse of power under color of law. Count 2, conspiracy to defraud the public. Count 3, election interference in violation of federal statute. And then the final blow, count 4, perjury before a grand jury. It was unprecedented. A sitting attorney general under criminal indictment while still in office. That afternoon, she resigned. Her statement was brief and bitter. "I maintain my innocence and will fight these charges. But I do not wish to distract from the work of justice." But the damage had been done. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt sat in the Oval Office, just steps away from the president's desk. Trump was sipping a Diet Coke, watching the news with a smirk. "You know, Karoline," he said, "they're already talking about you running for office." She chuckled nervously. "I'm just trying to keep up with the press briefings, sir." But Trump leaned in, serious now. "I'm not kidding. What you did, America saw that. And they're inspired. You didn't just survive the swamp, you drained part of it." Moments later, an aide burst in with breaking news. "Sir, you need to see this. Gallup just released a flash poll. Public trust in the administration just hit 62%, the highest since Reagan. And Karoline's favorability is at 71%. That's not just Republicans. That's independents and Democrats, too." Karoline's jaw dropped. Trump turned to her again. "You're not just a press secretary anymore. You're a movement." In a Texas diner, a waitress named Julia had tears in her eyes as she watched Karoline's Senate clip on her phone. She spoke for all of us. For once, someone in D.C. told the truth. In a high school classroom in Kansas, a civics teacher rewrote her lesson plan. "We're going to talk about what happens when one citizen stands against corruption." In Times Square, a digital billboard flashed with Karoline's face and the words, "Truth has no party, just courage." The phrase would soon become the rallying cry for a new political movement, built not on parties or slogans, but on accountability, freedom, and transparency. As Letitia James awaited trial, more former staffers flipped. Secret recordings surfaced, internal documents, and even private text messages showing her mocking citizens who questioned her narratives. One read, "Let them cry. We control the headlines." That one text would become the symbol of her downfall and would appear on hundreds of political campaign ads against corruption. In court, her legal team tried everything. Delay tactics, objections, claims of political persecution. But the jury, made up of everyday Americans, had seen enough. After a month-long trial, they returned the verdict in just 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Letitia James was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Outside the courthouse, the crowds erupted. Not in joy, but in relief. Justice at last had been served. 6 months later, Karoline Leavitt stood on a massive stage in Philadelphia, addressing a crowd of over 100,000. The event? The launch of a new national initiative called the Liberty Project, a bipartisan coalition fighting government abuse, election manipulation, and media disinformation. Behind her stood veterans, whistleblowers, journalists, and even former political rivals. "This isn't about me," she said. "This is about restoring America's promise, that truth will always rise, and tyranny will always fall." The crowd erupted in applause. A young girl in the front row held a sign that read, "Karoline Leavitt made me believe again." And somewhere in a quiet office, Donald Trump watched the moment unfold. Smiling, knowing the legacy he once feared would be tainted was now brighter than ever. A year later, Karoline Leavitt published a book titled Shattered Lies: How We Took Back the Truth. It debuted at #1 on every major bestseller list. Hollywood announced a limited series on the scandal titled Live from the Briefing Room, and whispers in DC grew louder by the day. Will Karoline run in 2028? For now, she focused on her mission to rebuild faith in government, protect future whistleblowers, and inspire the next generation to fight not for one party or ideology, but for truth, liberty, and justice for all.